Hello, Upstart. Welcome again. Well, there's now that story that has been trending from New York Times. Uh, the story about President William Ruto and his family being involved in jobs, lucrative jobs uh, for domestic workers in Saudi Arabia, and it's really something that has created uproar, outrage in the country, because we all know uh, how the Kenyan domestic workers are being treated in Saudi Arabia, from being underpaid to the abuse that they face in that country. And we have seen many times the Kenyan women being brought back home in coffins or badly injured uh, and mentally traumatized by what is happening there in Saudi Arabia. So uh, stick to the video as I tell you more about what happened in this investigation by the New York Times and what they exposed uh, against the Kenyan government, especially President William Ruto, his associates, and his family. Well, a groundbreaking investigative report by the New York Times has shed light on a troubling nexus involving Kenyan President William Ruto and his close associates, and a lucrative yet exploitative industry of recruiting domestic workers for Saudi Arabia. Yeah, the revelations uncover a web of complicity that raises grave concerns about human rights abuses, government accountability, and the ethical dimensions of labor migration policies. Well, millions of women from East Africa, especially Kenya and Uganda, have for years sought employment in Saudi Arabia as domestic workers, housekeepers, nannies, and caregivers, attracted by the promise of better livelihoods. However, the reality has often been grim, with countless workers facing abuse, including unpaid wages, physical and sexual violence, starvation, and severe restrictions under the kafala sponsorship system, which grants overwhelming power to employers, often leaving migrants trapped and vulnerable. The New York Times report paints harrowing stories of Kenyan domestic workers who have returned physically and emotionally traumatized from Saudi Arabia, and many others still stranded, trapped, and without legal protections or recourse. Among the victims are mothers with children born in Saudi Arabia who face dire legal limbo due to the lack of birth certificates, as the Kenyan government struggles to navigate diplomatic complexities with Riyadh. Well, so what are the political and business linkages? What makes this crisis worse is the direct involvement of powerful Kenyan political figures and their families in the staffing agencies that recruit and send workers to Saudi Arabia. President William Ruto's government has been accused of acting as an extension of this industry, which treats workers like commodities. One of Ruto's top advisors, Moses Kuria, and Kuria's politically active family members own and operate staffing agencies deeply entwined with Saudi labor recruiters. The bloodlines between public office and private business interests have raised accusations of conflict of interest and government interference aimed at promoting the labor export business despite the abuses which are being documented. Government spokespeople have defended their position by emphasizing the economic benefits of labor migration, citing the billions of dollars in remittances. Remittances, English is very hard. Dollars in remittances that Kenyans receive annually. However, critics argue that politicians, including President William Ruto, prioritize revenue generation over the welfare and rights of the workers. Past warnings and investigations that have been ignored. The New York Times investigative team found that despite widespread reports of mistreatment and calls from Kenyan Senate committees for stricter worker protection or suspension of transfers, the push to send more workers abroad accelerated after Ruto assumed the presidency in 2022. His administration negotiated new labor agreements with Saudi Arabia that fell short of improving wages or protections, effectively enabling the continuation of the status quo. Reports surfaced of Kenyan embassy staff in Riyadh showing indifference or hostility towards women seeking help, often burdening them with bureaucratic hurdles that delayed or denied repatriation and aid. Meanwhile, domestic worker death tolls and reports of torture and neglect continued to climb. So, what are the human cost of all this? The human cost of this labor export strategy is immense. The report highlighted distressing cases such as Beatrice Nasimiu, a Kenyan mother of twins who lived on the streets near a gas station in Saudi Arabia, desperately seeking repatriation. Others returned with broken bodies and psychological trauma after enduring years of neglect and cruelty. In a broader context, thousands of Kenyan women and their children are trapped in Saudi Arabia and face systemic legal and social exclusion, partly because children born out of wedlock cannot obtain birth certificates, leaving them stateless and unable to access basic services. The Kenyan government has responded by initiating DNA tests to verify percentage and processing certificates, yet the scale of the crisis remains overwhelming. So, what is the government response and public criticism? The Kenyan government, through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Prime Cabinet Secretary, acknowledged the crisis and states it's pursuing bilateral interventions with Saudi authorities. Programs to weed out and license recruiting agencies are underway, and official repatriations have increased since 2022. Nonetheless, public criticism remains fierce. Advocacy groups, human rights organizations, and affected families accuse. Uh, so, so the families also accuse the government of not taking any action against those recruiters and those agents involved in sending the Kenyans into Saudi Arabia where they're mistreated, and they feel like that the government has been protecting most of these rogue agents. To conclude, I would say is that this story has really brought negative publicity that this country did not need, and it needs to take action. And for President William Ruto and his family, it's now uh, puts them into global stares. Yeah, they are going to feel uh, the attacks, the constant attacks, because now people deservedly are attacking them because these accusations are really, really serious and they really need to take action immediately. Yeah. Thank you, and let's meet in the next video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.